take a moment and just allow your eyes to close. And allow yourself to withdraw deeply inward. In the old TV sets, they used to have these rabbit-eared antennae that would sit on top of the TV, pointing out to collect signal from somewhere out in the world. Imagine that you have those types of antennae around you. Most of the time, they're pointed outward, collecting all of the information, all of the signals, everything happening around us, every movement, every sound. Our attention, our awareness is constantly being pulled around like those antennae, just plugged in to all of the signals around us. But in meditation, we take those antennae. We don't turn them off. It's not about dulling the signal. It's about taking that antenna and turning it inward. So just allow yourself to visualize that the antenna around you now point inward. And they're picking up all of the signals from the world inside you. They're picking up presence, the light of awareness, the infinite spaciousness of the divine. They're picking up the perfection of the creation that is you, the wholeness and the rightness, even in the midst of whatever external drama you may be in the midst of. In those old TVs with the antenna, they also had these knobs that you would turn to go from channel to channel. So as you've switched the antenna from facing outward to facing inward, notice how you can simply change the channel to go from picking up the story, the show, the drama happening in the world around you, to picking up a whole different signal, a whole different reality, a whole different truth. allow yourself to pick up the signal of this inner truth, this inner presence. This inner stillness. If you imagine one of those meters that they use to measure the weather, and one way of having the meter is it's picking up the whole hurricane, the storm, the wind, the rain, the movement. But then you can move that meter into that eye of the hurricane, the eye of the storm, the place that's still. That even in the midst of the storm, it is still. Feel that place within you. And allow yourself to just drop into it. There'll always be movement outside, but allow yourself to feel and to find that place within you that is still, even in the midst of the movement. That place within you that is eternal and changeless. Even in the midst of the change. Slowly and gently, bring the palms of your hands together at chest level in Namaste. And gently rub the palms of your hands against each other. Press the palms of your hands into your closed eyes. Slowly lower your hands and open your eyes. Welcome. Welcome to Satsang. Starting, as always, with a question from our online audience. Then we will open it up to any questions that anybody here has. in your own words, define veganism? That's asked by Ruby Badila. Well, there's already a pretty good definition for veganism. It's not one of those very theoretical or unclear types of words. It's a choice about a lifestyle that's committed to nonviolence, that doesn't take in any animal products. So it takes vegetarianism, but it goes a step further. And it says also no dairy. Now in India, vegetarianism, of course, means no eggs. In the West, sometimes vegetarians eat eggs, so vegan means also no eggs, no dairy. For most people who are vegans, and I've been a vegan since I was a teenager. I started to drink milk again actually when I came to India. And essentially to say I'm, opposed to milk on moral grounds is like, walking into a cathedral and saying I'm opposed to communion on moral grounds. Milk is considered nectar from the divine, not just nectar as a food product. And so in a place like this ashram, where we have our own cows, and the cows are treated like members of the family, and the babies all drink first, and the babies stay with the mothers, and nobody ever gets shipped off or killed or anything when they stop giving milk. And so it ends up being kind of one part cow daycare center, and one part cow old age home, and one part milk-giving cows. I drink the milk. And should we be at anybody's house who happens to have their own cow, which is not quite as unusual in a place like India as it is in other parts of the world, I'll drink the milk. But otherwise I don't. And for most people I know who are vegans, it's really a moral decision. There's a lot about vegetarianism that is rooted in health, that's rooted in environmental protection. Those of you who have been coming to satsang for a while or have watched other videos I've given, you'll know that this is one of my passion topics, because being a vegetarian is pretty much the most powerful thing anyone can do to protect and preserve the planet, for world hunger, for water. Unless you are the president or prime minister of a big fossil fuel burning nation, or unless you happen to be the CEO or chairman of a major multinational company with factories that are spewing their waste in the air, unless you're one of those, for most of us, the best way to actually make an impact, the most powerful way that actually our decisions and lives can make an impact, is through our food choices. Because the impact of animal agriculture, of the meat industry, meaning animals who are specifically raised to be killed, not people who go into the forest with a bow and arrow and they shoot a deer and they bring it back to the village and people eat for a month from that deer. Not that. But the actual industrialization of meat is, according to the United Nations, the single greatest contributor to climate change. There's a whole host of statistics. I won't go into all of them now, but it's irrefutable. Whether it's methane, whether it's carbon dioxide, whether it's deforestation, the impact of animal agriculture is the single greatest contributor to climate change. It also is one of the biggest contributors to the loss of our planet's water. And if you've been paying attention to the news at all in any way over the last many years, you'll know that we're really on the brink of a global water shortage. The UN estimates that by 2040, the globe will only have half the drinking water we need. And of course, the dilemma with that, as most of us know, is that that doesn't mean that 100% of us will have 50% of the water we need. What it means is that the very tiny minority of people who have the luxury, the money to buy what they need, will continue to be able to have the water they need, and a huge percentage of people on Earth will not have access to water. We're expected to have up to hundreds of millions of water refugees by 2040. People who are actually forced to leave their homes, whether it's rising seawater or whether it's that their cities have no water, that the water has just dried up and gone. So it's a major, major issue. And I mention it here because in one of my very favorite statistics, the amount of water that goes into the production of one meal of beef, like you sit down for hamburgers with your family or a couple of your friends, it's about 10,000 liters of water, about 2,500 gallons of water, approximate conversion. Now, just to bring that home for you, that's the same amount of water that you use if you bathe every single day in a shower, not from a bucket, but in a shower that runs continually onto you for about 8 minutes a day, every day. In 6 months, you will use that same amount of water. Now, what that means is if you actually care about the planet's water, you have to ask yourself, are you prepared not to bathe for 6 months every time you eat beef? Chicken's about a third, so you only have to go about 2 months without bathing for every time you sit down to a meal of chicken. And, you know, the last statistic on this I'll share is about world hunger. Nobody would grab bread out of the hands of a starving child. I mean, if you saw a starving child on the corner of a street or in a village with a piece of stale bread, nobody I don't think I've ever met in my life, any religion, any race, any philosophy, any way of eating or living or shopping or thinking. There's just something in our very basic humanity that says you will not grab the bread out of the hands of a starving child. But actually that's exactly what animal agriculture does, because the grain that we're growing, the food that we're growing, is going to feed livestock. The cows, the pigs, the chicken, who become hamburgers and hot dogs and chicken McNuggets instead of feeding people. And when you cycle your grain like this, it takes 16 times as much grain to make beef than to make grain. So if I've got 16 pounds of wheat or rice or corn, I can make 16 pounds of bread or pasta or rice. Or I can feed all of that grain to a cow, most of which gets digested and pooped out, and at the end of the day, I end up with 1 pound of beef. So what that means is that every time you're eating meat, you're essentially saying, let 15 people starve because I deserve their food. And there's no philosophy on earth I know of that supports that. So a lot of people are turning vegetarian. Health reasons, yes, but also these sorts of planetary reasons. And veganism takes it to another level because, for me at least, it becomes much more about violence and supporting industries of violence. When you have cows who are treated like members of the family and their babies drink and loving hands milk them after their babies drink, and whatever is still coming out, they drink. And the cows are fed the same food that you eat, and they're kept as members of the family. In my ethics and my morality, there's nothing wrong with that. It's what people have been doing kind of forever. The dilemma comes when anything becomes industrialized. And so what happens with the dairy industry is that, especially in the West, but now more and more in India, is that it becomes incestuously linked with the beef industry. Because the babies who these dairy cows give birth to, because remember, like humans, they don't give milk just, it's not like they sweat milk. They give milk for their babies. They give milk the same way that humans give milk. Same reason. Because they get pregnant, they have babies. The babies need milk, so the cows have milk. The babies they give birth to, the moment they're born, they get taken away. They become veal, or they become hamburgers, depending on how long they're allowed to live. So there's a direct relationship between dairy and meat. And so we avoid milk. We also, just on a last aspect of this, for me, I've seen enough videos and read enough about the way that the dairy cows are treated. And there's stories literally that, it sounds strange to say about a cow, but that literally are stories of rape, of sexual abuse. I mean, if you listen and you see the way that these cows are inseminated, it's not that they take, like a female cow and a male cow, and they light a candle and close the door and, put them in a dark room for a couple of hours and boom, you get babies. They're all artificially inseminated. And if you see videos of these hidden cameras that have gone into the dairy farms, of the way these cows are inseminated, of the way that the people who work there speak to them, talk to them, it literally sounds like men in brothels. I mean, you wouldn't imagine it if you didn't see it. So it's violence. And just lastly, I've had people ask me whenever we have talks about this, almost inevitably somebody will ask, typically a young child, will say something like, well, if you were starving to death and you were stranded in the jungles, would you eat an animal? Would you eat a chipmunk or a squirrel or something to survive? And I always say, I certainly hope I could. I mean, I definitely don't have any moral problem with that. The issue is we don't actually need it today. We can get all of what we need. Vitamins, minerals, protein, whatever it may be. We can get it from other sources. And so it becomes unnecessary commercialized violence. So that's more than a definition of veganism, but as I said in the beginning, it's a deep and passionate topic for me. So, yeah, thanks. Thanks to Ruby for the question. Other questions that anyone here has? Yeah, just come up to either of the mics.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, your aura is very beautiful. And we all are blessed to have you here. So my question is time traveling a thing of real, where people can travel from one dimension to another, and they can fix people, they can come back and go in the past, future? Is that something we can do by meditation?
Yeah.
Dhyan?
So this is one of those really fun places where modern science is discovering that which the sages and the saints and the rishis told us thousands of years ago. If you start to read aspects of quantum physics, of which I am most definitely not an expert, not even a beginning student, but we speak so much about the bending of time and space, about the field in which it all exists and how that field bends, in which, absolutely, it's not so much time traveling, because see, time traveling again implies there's a now, there's a then, and I'm simply going from point A to point B to point C, then back to point A. Whereas as far as I understand it, it's much more a bending of time in a way that the distinction between then and now disappears. So then becomes now, now becomes then. Definitely that ability to occupy different time, different space at once was absolutely there. Pujya Swamiji tells the story of a saint who used to come here who had a very powerful siddhi, a very powerful power of quite literally being able to just show up in form, not just in consciousness, in different places. That you'd see him sitting in front of you. And then later, it was the days before smartphones or WhatsApp or anything like that, but later, people in Uttarkashi would swear that he was sitting meditating on the banks of Ganga up in Uttarkashi at exactly the same time. People would take a picture of him. He was bathing in Ganga in Uttarkashi while he'd sitting here at the same time. So there's lots of those types of stories. Absolutely it exists. I think the core question is, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for us? So to me, that means two things. Number one, it means our way of understanding space and time is most definitely not correct. That it's due to the limitations of the tools we have, the eyes we have, the telescopes we have, the scientific tools we have are not as yet able to see the actual way that space and time and field actually work. And that's a really powerful belief, because pretty much everything we believe is based on space and time, right? I'm this age, you're too young, you're too old, or it's based on what's happened to me, or it's based on what I'm going to do, all of my fears, my anxieties, my regrets. It's all about the past, it's all about the future. So when we're really aware that actually there is no past, there is no future, it's all right here, right now, it sort of blows all of that out of the water. The idea of space, over there, here, those people, again, it blows that out of the water. There is no over there.
So,
But the other piece, in terms of what matters to us, is we haven't yet learned how to live in this intersection of space and time. Whether it's linear, whether it bends, whether it's circular, whether it's a spiral, whether it is a different shape entirely, is actually irrelevant until and unless we've learned to live right here, right now. Because that we know is true. Any definition, any vision, any philosophy, right here, right now is where we are. And so, rather than getting into the whole checkered of time travel, space travel, true, not true, possible, not possible, well, figure out right here, right now first.
So do you think like mantra chanting, doing yagna, havana, they help you decode the truth behind the time traveling?
I think they help you live right here, right now. I think they help clear you of the ignorance that prevents you from living right here, right now, that makes us yearn to be able to travel. I come from an academic background in psychology, and a lot of times when you're working with people who are suffering, whether it's addictions, whether it's depression, whatever it is, especially if they're people with some money, one of the things that you'll hear a lot is I'm not going to be able to come to therapy next week because I'm going off to Tahiti, or I'm going off to Fiji, or I'm just going to go live on this, Caribbean island, as though somehow my alcoholism, my drug addiction, my depression, my anxiety, my misery is going to be something that I can just leave in my locked home and isn't going to come with me. And in psychology, we call that pulling a location. And it means you're just avoiding the point. Problem is in your mind. Problem is in your life. It's going to come with you wherever you go. If you are suffering here, you're going to be suffering on a beach in the Caribbean. And so sit here and solve your problem. And I feel the same way about the urge for time travel. Can it happen? Sure. But if you're not happy here, what makes you think you're going to be happy there? We know that even as far as next life, forget just time travel in this life, brand new body, brand new incarnation. What goes with you? Man, buddhi, ahankar. Sukshma sharira, the subtle body goes with you. All of that is causing your problems goes with you. So if you time travel, it's going with you. Your body may not. Your body may still be sitting here, or you may be able to bilocate like that other saint.
So you're saying
but the subtle body is going to go with you.
So the soul changes the body, goes to another one, and all your habits, depending on the karma, changes. And okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Your karma bhumi, you could say. Your dharma bhumi. The land upon which you are meant to do your karma, to fulfill your dharma, is right here. It's why you're here. The universe doesn't make mistakes. If you were meant to be in a different time, you would have been born then. Do your karma here. Fulfill your dharma here. When you get enlightened, if you want to have the siddhi of bilocating, go ahead, do it. But don't think that you can somehow avoid the karmic package, or avoid your dharma, or avoid any of that here because you're going to go off into another time, another space. Because you carry you with you. Yeah, let's figure this one out first, then we'll figure out the rest. Other questions? Yeah, come to the mic.
I deal with young girls, and these days I've seen so many of them going into depression. And like casually they'll say, no, I am in depression, please, I want to lock myself up in the room, or all these kind of things. Or I've also heard recently from young boys and girls saying that they want to go into past life regression. And they have been going for that. And some of my students are therapists also who are taking them for all these things. So like sometimes I feel, is it good for them or not?
Yeah, great question. So it's kind of a two-part question. The first is the mental health crisis we are facing today,
Yes.
especially in our youth. It's very real. It parallels exactly and directly the rise in use of smartphones and social media. If you go back over the last 25, 30 years and you look at rates of depression, rates of suicide, especially in the younger generation, and you look at rates of use of smartphone and social media, the two lines literally go like this. Unfortunately, we can't rewind history. We can't uninvent these things. But just as throughout history, whenever anything threatens to harm us, and especially harm our youth, we bring about rules and regulations and systems around it, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's drunk driving, whether it's teenage pregnancy, whether it's gangs, whether it's hazing, whatever it may be. Whenever there are things that rise in society that we see in a big scale are really impacting and harming a lot of our youth, we enact rules around them. And it is way past time of enacting rules around smartphones and social media for youth. But it's a different topic. Thank you for the work that you're doing. As far as past life regressions and stuff for youth, I wouldn't recommend it. For adults, absolutely anybody who wants to get into it, sure, why not? The dilemma when we're young is, and this is actually one of the issues with social media anyway, is figuring out this particular identity is so hard, right? Kids are suffering. We all suffered. Do I belong in this group? Do I belong in that group? Am I like this? Am I like that? Who am I? It's a period of differentiating from our parents. We may do what they did, we may rebel 180, but it's all in this effort to kind of understand, who am I? We try on different things. For most of us, if we go back and look at, pictures of ourselves when we were 14, 15, 18, 19, they're fun because you laugh, because they're nothing like you are today. And it was sort of a period of life where you were trying on different identities, different ideas to understand sort of, who are you? What distinguishes you from others? And what social media does is it requires us, in addition to figuring out this identity, we end up essentially having to create a curated identity online that has nothing really to do with who we are and everything to do with what's going to get likes and comments. And so it completely warps the understanding and the creation of a real identity. Because even though they're separate, of course they intersect. If I realize that, me doing a post about me doing my homework, or baking a cake with my little sister or brother or grandmother, gets like no likes and no comments, but me sitting in a bikini by the side of the pool gets all kinds of likes and comments, well, that's going to impact how I think about myself. It's going to impact how I start to live. Because that has become the new social approval. So that's one aspect. But then the dilemma becomes when you start to look at something like past life regression. Like, hey, we can't even figure out this life. Now on top of all that, you need, oh yeah, and last time, I was a murderer, and before that,
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
I know. I was my father's wife. Really?
Yeah, also.
You want to mess up kids' brains with all of
Yes.
that at this point? It's hard enough to deal with navigating your relationships with your parents in this birth. The last thing you need is some idea that in some past birth you actually were lovers, or you were enemies, or you were, this or that. All it does is create way more confusion, way more distress. As adults, it can certainly be one of many modalities that enable us to understand why we have the characteristics we have, the struggles we have, the triggers we have. One of many modalities. Some people find it useful, others don't. I don't really come down on either side. I don't find it so useful that I would say to people, oh, you really should do it. But I also don't find it so harmful that if somebody said they wanted to do it, I would never discourage them from doing it, assuming that their psyche is strong. Anyone whose psyche is fragile, I would absolutely caution them against doing it. It's similar, it's a different situation, but it's similar to the rise that we're seeing now in a lot of use of psychedelics around healing. For people who have psyches that can take it, who have some degree of health and strength and understanding and solidity within ourselves, to be able to be exposed to a completely different, expanded reality can be, in many cases, and there's a lot of research emerging around this, can be incredibly healing, incredibly beneficial, probably far more beneficial than past life regression. But I would never give it to youth. I would never tell teenagers to do that. Aside from a physiological level, I feel like the last thing that youth need is more confusion. So, yeah, I would not encourage it. I would really try to help them understand this particular incarnation. The challenges, the gifts, the struggles, the two identities, body self, karmic journey, particular incarnation, and then soul, spirit, divine. I think that's probably enough for an adolescent brain to have to balance just those two identities. Yes, you have a body. Yes, you're in an incarnation. Yes, you need to be responsible to that, honor that, celebrate that, develop that, and don't identify as it. Because actually who you are is soul and spirit, and so you're not your grades, you're not your scores, you're not the university you get into, you're not your weight or your height or your beauty or your social media status. It's really helpful in that way. But I would think 100 times and then think another 100 times before bringing in another identity issue into that formulating brain.
But these days, you have so many counselors around, and parents easily, they want to take their children to the counselor. I sometimes tell them, see, the mother is the best counselor. When I was small, like whenever I got into such kind of situations, or I didn't feel too happy about anything, I would go running to my mother, see, this is what is happening, and she would counsel me. She was she was like a friend and a solace. But nowadays, what parents do, they just shift their responsibility and they take people to counselors and psychologists who are really business people. And they are, really.
Yeah, I know. I come from that world, I know. So first of all, you were very blessed to have a mother, who you actually had that type of relationship with, B, who you could trust to actually guide you in the right way, and C, who was personally evolved and developed and healthy enough to be able to be that model for you. Mm-hmm. Not everyone is so blessed. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not in favor of counselors and psychologists. Yeah. Ideally, yes, of course, if you have a parental figure or a family figure who knows you, who is psychologically, spiritually healthy, able to be there for you, guide you, nothing like it. But a lot of people don't have that. And in that way, business people are not business people. The field of psychology and counseling actually does play a really big beneficial role. However, there's a lot of different types of psychologists, and I think this is where parental discretion is important, is who are you taking them to?
And children are not free with their parents, Even in the middle of the night, like I have taught hundreds and hundreds of students. Their mothers, and some of them are still studying in college. At times I get calls. I have made myself free for them, and Beautiful. I've told them. And even in the middle of the night, I get a call, I pick it up. Because I know somebody's in trouble, that's why somebody's calling me. And then the conversation goes on and nobody understands me. Ma'am, it's like this, it's like that. Sometimes my husband says, what are you up to? Go off to sleep now. I said, no, this girl needs me. Some have problems with their in-laws, some have some other problems. Like they want to discuss and they don't find the right person.
I know. May there be 10,000 more like you. This is what we need more of in society. It's people who are there for other people. I mean, that's ultimately what we're all called upon to be for others, whether it's for youth, whether it's for other people in our world. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to be seen. One of the greatest pains that people have, and of course it's much worse when we're young, but it's still painful as we grow, is to not be seen, not be understood. And yeah, tragically, there's a lot of parents who themselves are wrapped up in their devices and not present with their kids. But I think that as a society, as a global community, helping our youth in whatever way we have the capacity to do that, helping them anchor and ground deeply within themselves, to know the divine within them. I mean, one of the things that I tell students all the time and am passionately committed to telling them and to reminding them and re-reminding them, is you are not your scores. You're not your grades. You're not your ranking. Because sadly, that's what schools are teaching, and sadly, it's what a lot of parents are emphasizing. Why aren't you number one? Why didn't you get this score? Why did this kid do better than you? Why can't you be like your cousin? Why? They get judged like that. Our societal definitions of success need to change so that we stop raising children who essentially have to be robots. We really need to work together. Whether they're your biological children, whether they're children of the world, whether they're your online community, whether they're people who read what you write, watch what you post, are impacted by schools that you have some impact over in some way, whatever it may be. But I feel like it's kind of a global responsibility to work with the youth. In all of these capacities, and may you train 1,000 people under you to really to just play that role. You know, in conclusion, just to share one of my favorite psychological studies, they did a study where this is decades ago, where they were comparing different styles of therapy. Behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, et cetera, to see what worked. And of course, like any good scientific study, you have to have a control group in which they don't get any therapy at all. And so they gave all of these different subjects. Some of them got therapy type 1, some got therapy type 2, some got therapy type 3. And then, of course, you had your control group that got no therapy. All they got was just a random nice person to talk to. And what they found at the end of the study, as embarrassing as it was not only was there no statistically significant difference between any of the different styles of therapy, but there actually was no statistically significant difference between the therapy and just the nice person. That literally just having a nice person to talk to, who actually listened to you, was as beneficial as getting therapy. So it is a sad statement on our society that we have to start paying for nice, wise, compassionate people who will actually listen to us. And here we are. So as we recognize the societal problem, we also recognize that in the interim, at least, we have this solution that actually is very beneficial for very many people. Certainly for people suffering for more severe mental health issues. But absolutely, having someone who loves you, who cares about you, who listens, who understands, who embraces you, nothing like it.
That's what I keep
Yes.
telling the parents.
Beautiful, beautiful.
You have to give time to your child.
Absolutely.
Quality time to your child, and spend some time every day with your child. Talk to your child. And that's what I tell the children also, that you go to your parents, make them feel that you want them. Talk to them.
Yeah.
So that is much more needed than other people, like you were saying, no?
Absolutely.
The therapy you talked about is very true.
Wonderful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. A beautiful morning and day to our family joining us online. And I look so forward to being together tomorrow.
Thank you so much for enlightenment. And we need people like you.
So much.